used to covering things up.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, it being 2 minutes to 6 on January 18th, 2022, we'll start this finance meeting. And we will start with approval of minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes for,
I will say, on the agenda, I do have minutes from June, September, and November, and currently I only have the November. I've been working backwards, figuring that what we did in November is more important than what we did in June at this point, but I'm working through getting those updated, and keep saying I should have them for the next meeting, but I'll definitely have them for the next meeting.
Okay,
okay.
all right,
Just
so
make that
November
for November.
15th then.
So only the approval of November 15th.
Okay, so we have a motion for
And a
November and a second. Okay, any questions? Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. All right, we will move to discussion on 2022-23 accelerated opt-out resolution. Dan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Melanie. As this comes up pretty much every year, and I know we've done the opt-out now for, I think since I've been here. At this point, with the exceptions that are allowable under Act 1, only being retirement and special ed costs, we've gone through the calculations that PDE puts forms out there that you can basically plug your numbers in, and it'll tell you as an estimate whether or not you would qualify for exceptions. And for clarity, that's to exceed the Act 1 index. For full transparency, the adjusted Act 1 index for the district is 4.2% for next year. So at this point, we ran through the calculations, the templates that PDE puts out there essentially spit out the answer. We wouldn't have any qualifications for exceptions for pension or for special ed.
Okay.
So the opt-out resolution is essentially telling the state that the board has no intention of requesting any exemptions to exceed the Act 1 index, and the plan is to have the opt-out resolution on the workshop meeting. This should have been something that we addressed earlier, probably at the November meeting. And it honestly wasn't on my radar, and since it got let go, then it's, as far as the timeline for PDE, it needs to basically be acted on relatively quickly. That is, the 27th is actually the date that PDE says you need to take action on whether or not you're going to exceed or request the exemptions or not.
Okay.
I know I think there was a year in the past where it wasn't even filed. Truthfully, if you don't file it, you basically are just giving up your ability to request that. So essentially, if you take no action, you can't exceed it, and if you take the action saying we won't exceed the index, you've opted out of going forward. So
so in actuality, it's just a formal declaration that we don't anticipate going above, no harm, no foul.
correct.
Right.
So here's a copy of last year's. We're going to update this. So where you see the 3.7%, this is going to be 4.2.
Okay.
So 4.2 is the adjusted index for the district for the 22-23 school year. And so we're not going to exceed that. And then, on our side, once the board takes action on it, we just need to file with the state like as Mr. McCarrick said, it's a formality to say we're not going to exceed 4.2.
Okay. I think we're all good with that. I'm good with that.
Yep.
Okay.
I assume that much, and other than this is, all the template said you're not going to be able to exceed it anyway.
Kind of a
Short
three-way
of-
tie.
Yeah, short of going to referendum, if there was any need for that, that's the other alternative. Never, unless there's something that's really on the horizon that would require a referendum vote, there's not at this point.
Okay.
That's pretty much where we are.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, let's move on to the old charter school cost review and my deep status.
So I know this was on the September agenda, and we discussed it at that point, and actually it's pretty optimistic. So at that point, you see on the screen here, we were actually projecting that we were going to have a budgetary excess of a little bit over $600,000. That's not the case anymore. So we've had increases in our charter school enrollment, and so at this point, and I'm toggling between two numbers, it's probably going to fall. That we would still currently projecting to have an excess in the budget, but not anywhere near the $630,000. It's probably more between $256,000 and $383,000. I know that's a big spread. That spread is kind of because there's always a moving target with students enrolling and coming back to the district. If they're enrolled in a charter and then they move out of the district, so then there's kind of a lot of moving parts.
So that's best guess today.
Best guess today.
Okay.
And so I'm hopeful that it's closer to the 383 that was taking what we've paid to date and then extrapolating out the enrollment currently out through the end of the year. So we've paid for most of the charter school bills we paid through December. There are a couple that they bill a little off cycle, so if it doesn't make our board payment, our board agenda, it's not paid yet. But I looked at each individual charter school, took the spreadsheet that our staff puts together, and we took payments to date, X number of months remaining in the year, and extrapolated that out. So at this point, it's kind of a best guess that the total charter costs will be between, let's say, 2.8 and 2.9 million on the year. It's unfortunate. It'd be nice if we can pull some of the students back in, and I think Dr. Roach would agree that, from our professional staff, we believe that they would do a better.
We do a better job. Yep.
Put it out there. So that's where we are. And I'm, at this point, not sure which direction it's honestly going to go.
Okay. So the increase is from our meeting in September. Now on line 75, 76, there are those totals there. You have 138 and 37. Is 138 what we started with, and then 37 was the additional enrollments, or is that something else?
These are the current enrollments between regular ed and special ed.
Okay.
It could have been.
Oh, it's just hard to see what the total is at the top because you couldn't see it.
Okay, I was just curious what those numbers were.
Freeze pains. That might be helpful.
Yeah, there you go.
Do we have a number of actual students that migrated to charter school from our September meeting to now? If it's not easily acceptable, don't worry about it. You can always email it to us.
I think it's 21 students.
Okay.
Extra.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it was, I guess it was 150, but I do have that spreadsheet.
Of course, we always have to ask for something you don't have exactly.
No, I tried to plan that out. I thought that I had it up and running, but.
While you're looking for that, I'd like to ask Dr. Roche a question. Do we have like a survey or a questionnaire or anything? When a parent pulls their children, say, out of Upper Perk and puts them in PA Virtual Academy, do we ask them why they've chosen the PA Virtual Academy over our virtual program?
Sort of like an exit interview.
Yeah, do we know why we're losing them when we have an online academy?
I'm not aware of that through our disenrollment process.
Okay.
We have reached out when we were coming back, trying to bring people back, specifically to them to think about coming back and those type of things. And then, typically it was mid-year, like I know it was one that was lost a couple weeks ago, that they weren't filling anything out for us. they were upset with whatever was going on, regardless of what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we need to start thinking about why we're losing to cyber. I mean, it's one thing to go to a charter school, but when you're talking about cyber charter school and we offer our
The
own,
one I
I'd
just
love
referenced-
to know,
The
you
one, the
know.
one we just referenced is because our program doesn't have live teaching or live instructors in time,
Okay,
you know, and but that was by design when we had 90+% coming in,
Yep.
you know.
Right.
We had planned on having, elementary, you know, like a teacher doing 1, 2, or depending upon the numbers,
Mhm.
and they were in the single digits.
Right.
Couldn't even support that.
Yeah, I think there was like 8 kids in all.
Well, no, K to 5, 8
K to
kids,
5 or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
It wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we
so you
could
think
support
that's probably one of the
As of
main,
right now, the mass exodus, I mean, I think we've been consistently, Dan, you probably know, consistently the numbers of student, charter school kids pre-COVID have been 110, 115, 120, type of that. So we're talking about that difference. The average is probably in the 110s, let's say,
okay.
over the course of previous years from numbers I saw, so.
And right now we're at 154.
This was September.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're probably like 170
Oh,
now.
oh,
Yeah.
175.
Okay.
All right.
I will say a lot of those people, again, I think last year we saw a little more, this year not as much, but some still taking my piece off the board to not have to deal with any COVID craziness, even though we had a program. You know, it was definitely the mentality that they've been doing this forever, so we're gonna go with them. you know?
Okay.
Therefore, they must be better,
They must be,
even if
right.
they're not, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
The
mean,
perception is there.
Yeah, and I think at the secondary level, we have always had a program with Ingenuity and everything, and then we just kind of expanded it down to the middle school,
Mhm.
and that, we still had some people, I'm not sure if they're reflected in these numbers, probably not, because I still have charter schools on the left, but some of the secondary ones that are with us, I guess there are kids that they expanded the Ingenuity online program there, just down to the middle school to keep some of them.
So are we not going to investigate doing any kind of survey at all?
Or do
I
you think
mean,
they're not gonna bother?
wouldn't it benefit us to survey those folks every year? At least nudge them? Hey, here we
Yeah.
are again.
I mean, if
Get
we
up.
want, if we have any hopes of
They're
bringing
always-
them
yeah,
back, to me, it seems like we need, we need to find out what will entice them back.
And what can we do better?
Right. that's
Yeah,
what I'm
well, are
saying.
they just angry and?
Right, if they're just angry and don't want to have anything to do with us, there's not much we can do, but if there is
But
something.
I want to know why they're angry. Aside from the pandemic, I want to know
Right.
why they're angry. Why are there 110 families that don't like us? Or don't think we're doing a good job? And what can we do better? I mean, isn't that kind of best practice?
So would Kim be somebody to talk to about that? Or, I mean, is that, I'm trying to think where we go with that. I mean, we pestered Georgie for exit interviews of that kind, not that kind, no.
Probably Kim.
Yeah, either Kim or Sarah or her in terms of that piece, but we can definitely put together the survey, but depending upon, and I know.
I really would like to know why families choose charter schools and all that kind of stuff.
I know that it's come up in the past, because I've asked the question, you know, just why? Why would what would the draw be? And some of the answers that I've gotten were, so if their particular student may have, you know, a social anxiety or something along those lines, even pre-COVID, so.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
it's the anxiety and I have to ride the bus, I have to go to school, I have to, you know.
And I would certainly want to know if there's issues of bullying and harassment, you know, even perceived or otherwise. Still like to know what they're thinking.
The other is that the homeschool kids, when they get to a certain point, mom and dad can't support their schooling.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So it's, you know,
So
they're
they'll
either
have homeschool
continuing,
aside.
they're continuing homeschool aside, but they're continuing with that decision they made
Well-
a while ago.
What's
Maybe
our
second.
increase in charter schools been since COVID? Has it pretty much doubled, or it's been a while since?
Well, if we had 110 before,
We're
now we have 175, so that's, you know, another third.
But was that pretty much stable
Yeah.
over those previous years?
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
higher, I think last year was higher, it was in the 190s.
It was about 198,
Yeah.
197. So we have seen return, you know, students return. It's just not to the degree that we'd like to see, you know. And ideally, you know, I think that Ms. Pennypacker's point, the number would be 0. I don't think it's realistic, but if we were able to get back down to that pre-COVID number, and then,
Yes.
you know, still investigate why
I mean,
what
yeah.
is drawing people.
To
Because
not even ask is kind of like we don't care. You know, and as we develop a survey, if that's the route we're going, and I hope we are, I hope this survey reads something like, we want you back, help us,
You know,
help us
what
know
could
what
we
we
have
need
done
to do.
better, or, I mean, a critique would be helpful.
I mean,
Any
to
critique would be
let
helpful.
kids leave this district and not know why is ludicrous. It's like, we don't give a crap.
Well, the "we want you back" is not a survey for right now, because.
No,
You're
I
saying
get it.
that's a May, June, if
Yeah,
they're gonna entertain
Take the
coming
mask
back.
off.
timing's
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, and, you know, word too, that we understand these are challenging times, dealing with a pandemic for the last 2 years, but help us do better. How do we get you back? Not like that, but you know what I mean. I mean, we're not even
speaking to
asking.
others, but just the general intent is, you know, why did you leave? What
Yeah.
will it take to bring you back?
We're not even
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't care about us, we'll just go.
to a degree, I know we've had some families move in district that were already placed at charter schools. So, you know, if they would have, you know, to that point, if either they've become comfortable with the charter school format and the online format, or if they've had a negative experience with an in-person, you know, in the district elsewhere, they move into our district, but they're already, you know, kind of ingrained in their program. Those students, I'm hard pressed to say that, you know, you're going to change their mind, because
I'm
if
not
they are
saying-
succeeding.
Yeah, no, I know. We did do some probing, I mean, when we were planning probably a year ago, in terms of reaching out to the group. There were, I don't know if it was a specific survey in terms of this, but there's definitely some feedback in terms of, well, are you coming back, and some of the feedback there, so see if I can pull that up.
Okay.
Well, I'd like it to be a little bit more friendlier than, are you coming back or not? You know, it's like, help us understand what we can do better.
All right. So I guess we can revisit that at some point, or maybe we can revisit it in curriculum instruction, or, because, you know, we're all connected, so. Okay. All right, anything else on that?
I'll say, not to take away from, you know, the idea of really looking into it and trying to ask the question. The marketing campaign that the charter schools put forth is pretty strong.
It's
And-
free
and
school.
So it's free school, and I do think that to a degree, what is lacking may be just the knowledge that what this really looks like in your home district when you're going to a charter school, or when you're being, you know, when you're making that decision, is that there is still a financial impact. There still is ramifications on the taxpayers, on the underlying, you know, the overall budget, and it tends to be more expensive for the district and for the taxpayers. And I think that message certainly isn't in any of the documents that you'll get from any of the charter schools. I
No.
think that, you know, we could also put that out there, but I'm not sure how you broach that topic without, you know, to me, I think that's a bit of a fine line with saying, okay, well, this is the impact. I mean, this is the easiest way to say, this is the impact to $2.8 million compared to what charter school, you know, costs were a couple of years ago. But when that's speaking to the committee, or that's speaking to the board, and getting that across to.
And we'd have to have our own
So-
TV show and
Yeah,
commercials.
we'd have to have our own commercial and say, this is the impact, this is what the results are of having an additional 65 students
Mhm.
selecting the charter schools. Not sure the best message, you know, best way to put that out there, but I think that is another piece of it, another piece of the puzzle where we're competing with that on the marketing side, which
True.
it does.
Keep those
You have
commercials.
plenty of people that don't know that it costs money, that somebody's footing the bill. and
It's free.
It's the district and it's the taxpayers. I think that part does get lost in all the charter school conversation.
Yep, I agree, I do, I don't like those commercials at all. All right, anything else on the charter schools? All right, so talk about a budget planning update. Where are we at? Where are we going to be at?
We're buzzing through this agenda.
Yeah,
So with the conversation of the opt-out, which is going to be the 4.2%. That is our adjusted Act 1 index. But as a question always comes up year over year, and what the STEB ratio is, and I do believe that this was put out, earlier, a little while ago in the summer, that zero doesn't mean zero this year. Zero really means negative 1.13. So essentially, when we're saying 0 is 0, the tax rate is basically mimicking the millage rate. If the millage rate increases 1%, tax rate increases 1%. In a 0 meaning 0 world, and I'll keep using Ray Ann's.
Yep, that's a good
Ray Ann's
analogy.
And, but so as far as the STEB ratio goes, for the 22-23 school year, 0 actually goes the opposite direction. So if the board were to pass a 0 millage increase, it actually has a negative 1.13% effect on the real estate taxes, which is the major driver of our revenue stream. I will point out, so over on the right-hand side, the gross amount of that decrease would be roughly $441,000. The net amount is really it's negative. It's a loss of $233,000. The difference is the assessed values that have changed.
Yeah.
So I've updated this to reflect the increase in the assessed values, which, as it factors through the calculation, kind of takes care of some of the potential loss if at a 0 millage increase. And I'm using the same spreadsheet that's been used in the past. I know that, rather than kind of recreate the wheel, I know that everybody's seen this before.
Yep.
So I figured this is probably the easiest approach to show this result. So assuming that we don't want to bring in less money than we did this year, we would at least need to increase or request an increase to the millage of, let's say, if it were 1%, the net amount revenue for real estate taxes be roughly $156,000 more next year than this year based on a 1% millage increase. What a 1% millage increase looks like, so you could have a 1% millage increase, it's still and there's some rounding, so please bear with it. So if it was 1.13, it's 1.14% decrease on the tax side of it. So with 1%, $156,000, it's an increase. It's not going to cover a whole lot more. In the grand scheme of things, when we're talking about a $71, $72, $73 million budget, 156 is a kind of a drop in that bucket. So that's just kind of want to present to you the kind of where we are with all of this. That we've gone 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, or 0 meant really, instead of 4.2 meant 7.3. We've had it go the other direction where the STEB ratio would have.
That's the first time I've seen
increased
it.
the other direction. And this essentially goes in the opposite direction, which it's a positive if you say on the taxpayer side of it, and at the same time, it could be a negative depending on the taxpayer side if the revenue's not there to support programs. and not being the doomsday person either. I just want to make sure that we're having an open, honest conversation on all of this. So this is just the local real estate side of it. This doesn't take into account where we are on the expenditures. So right now we're working on compiling the expenditures. We have budget input from the buildings and the departments, and we're putting that all together. And that is on the agenda for the board retreat on the 22nd. That we'll be going through a draft version of the budget. That's yet to then go through more reviews, which we do, basically by committee, go through basically line by line to make sure that each item, each lines, all the lines are justified, and we know that there's no fluff, or if there is fluff, we're anticipating we have a little extra there because there's contingencies in place. If we do have, for instance, we have charter schools for this year, we budgeted additional funds anticipating having more students out, hoping we didn't have to use it, but just in case, we need to make sure that we do have those funds available. And I apologize, I'm bouncing around because I just want to touch on that as we go through it. So, I know that in the past we've gone through percentage by percentage. I guess I'd be interested to know from the board's perspective how they would, how you guys would appreciate or better understand this as we go through it. To say, I know in the past we presented 0, 1%, 2%, 3%, and then the max if it was 3.7 last year, 4.2 for next year. Is it? None of that's locked in, so it could be some oddball amount. It could be 2.9376%. So I want to be able to present that to the boards of the committee and then the board as a whole. And I'm not sure if it's just as easy as we can make it, where you just plug the number in and it'll spit out this scenario. We change the parameters and it'll, we put it in the formula and it just comes out with, here's the amount that we need.
I think my personal opinion is the 1, 2, 3% is fine. We can figure out the little nuances in the middle there. I think we can figure that out. Does that make sense to you guys?
It makes sense. I wouldn't mind having the utility to where you just plug it.
Oh, yeah, that would, I have a
But
spreadsheet.
that should be, that should be relatively easy for us to do on our own if we wanted to. So,
Yeah, yep,
whatever makes the best sense for you.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
No, I agree. I think that on a big picture, having 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the max, since it's over 4, does make sense. But having the utility to be able to put it in and see where we're going to end up
That'd be great.
would help.
Yeah, the graduated scale of 1, 2, 3, 4 is great because at least we know ballpark figures, and then we can each do our own guesstimates on what it is until we give you final direction on what to plug in.
Okay.
I think 0 is important this year also because of the step.
Yes.
We need to see not just the 1, 2, and 3,
Yes.
but the 0.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense.
And compared to the current year, if I scroll over here. This one. I got progressively smaller.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Good.
So, if you were to look at this and that graduated scale, so the at 0, essentially, with the current assessed values as of December 30th, we would be basically posting a negative $233,000. From there, then all these other increases are based off of the 0. So the only one that's based on prior year is the negative posting. Otherwise, we're still, we're moving in the right direction as far as still being positive, bringing in more revenue than in years past. But I do think that the revenue conversation does kind of put, to a degree, the cart before the horse. I think that we will be focusing on the expenditure side, and you'll see that on the 22nd of where we do anticipate being with budget, with from all the departments, salaries. The nuance on salary are some of the unknowns that are still out there as far as negotiations and things of that nature. So those do pose some nuances and some unknowns. As far as then how that factors into our timeline for budget, we're still planning on eventually, once we have the proposed final budget, it would still be on the agenda in May, the May board meeting, and then for final approval of the budget in June. Based on the timeline that I was trying to put out to, internally, we could have it in April, but because of those unknowns and where we're going to stand, I think that it probably makes the most sense to kind of give us as much time as possible to hammer out as many details as we can and fine tune the budget into May, and then still, if there's any fine tuning between the May board meeting and the June board meeting. So,
Do we have costs like healthcare yet? I don't remember what month that is.
we have the first, the first rate, the first look. I don't know that we have the second look
Okay.
yet.
Okay. I mean, that's a major
Yeah,
expense, that's why I asked about that one.
that's
We have a first look from negotiations as well,
Mhm.
so we have.
Oh, okay, good. Good. Okay.
So all of those kind of factor in, and then also, the annual increases to PCERS are going to get factored into. So, off the top of my head, I should have had this written down. I know it's increasing, but I'd have to double back on how much it is going up.
Is it, like, right now, is it like 34% or something like that?
34.94.
Yeah.
It's
I know it's
into
a
the
lot.
35s.
Mhm.
So essentially, if you're going to say 35%, base salary plus 35% and 35-point-some-odd%, that's really the cost
Yep.
of the employee, and that's something that does get lost. I mean, it's a huge piece that if you're talking from a public perspective, and you say, okay, well, that's a $50,000 employee. No, they may have a
It's
$50,000
an $85,000
salary,
employee.
Right, at 35%. And then on top of that, you have medical benefits, you have medical, dental, vision, and payroll, tax side of it. I mean,
Right.
deal with it on the business side.
Yes,
So-
I do. Yes, I do.
So very quickly, that $50,000 employee becomes a $100,000 employee. And so that is something that needs to be considered when we're going through this, and if we're looking at staffing, that all gets factored into the budget. So when we do propose, additional staff, if that were the case, we do budget for that, for the whole employee, not just the salary. What else did I want to touch on here?
Do we have our final figures from last year yet?
I don't have those yet, no.
Okay.
We're still working through those.
That's okay, I was just asking.
No, normally we have them by now. We've had a couple delays in getting sort of everything tied out, and still working through that with the auditor. So we'll have that. As soon as I have it, I'm going to have it to the finance committee. Just so you guys have that going forward, and then it's going to factor into realistically when we're talking about budget and where we ended up last year compared to what we're looking at this year. I know that's all going to come into the conversation. So
Yep.
as soon as I have it, the board will have it. But yeah, I don't have that as of yet.
Okay.
35.26.
35.26?
That's a PCERS number, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Ouch.
So it's a big chunk of change.
Yep.
And I will say there's, on the flip side, we do get reimbursed by the state for, let's say roughly half, depending on the funding, if any of it's federally funded, employees. But basically half of it does come back in a subsidy. But what we do need to do is still budget for the full expenditure, because even though we take in, we've got expenditures and revenues, and they sit on two different sides of the income statement. So essentially, we have to budget the full expenditure, because on this side, half the revenue is going to come in, but you can never the two shall meet, essentially, so they don't get netted together on the expenditure side. So we're always budgeting for the full expense with the anticipation that the state is going to cover their half. you know, it's a big number. So let me just go back to this, and as far as,
Dan, and just as a side note, for what it's worth,
Yep.
for Melanie and Keith, and it's just a story. I never realized the money that a school district spends on teachers' health care until I retired.
Yeah,
Once I retired, it floored me. The money that districts put out for employee health care is unbelievable.
yep, it is.
I've been saying
And I
that.
just never absorbed it while I was working. I just never sat down and thought about it. And then when I
I
retired.
mean, I know how much I pay as a company owner, and we pay 100% of our insurance for our
Right,
people.
it all depends on your perspective. I remember years ago, probably 22 years ago when I was working in a previous company, at one point they put out a earnings statement to each individual, and they said, this is what you're valued at this year.
I've
You
done
know,
that
and-
before.
And 25 years ago, I was making like 6 figures according to that statement. It's like, tell you what, give me that money and I will take care of my own medical investment and everything else. But, employees' contributions and employer contributions are drastic,
Yep,
depending on the industry that you're in.
yep, we've
So-
done that, I've done that before, when you get some people that are cranky and acting like, where's my raise, and you're like, well, this is what you really make. Like, this is really what you make.
And then you
Yeah.
throw
What the
in
company pays
Peter's
for you.
contributions and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty phenomenal.
Yep,
Yes.
yeah, those are good letters, and we have had conversations, Georgie and I have had conversations on what that would look like as far as putting those out. My only, caveat to her was, don't put payroll taxes. That's the one thing that I remember, I think my wife had gotten, one of the cost letters, and it not only had, salary, if there were bonuses, medical costs, but then it put payroll taxes. And I said, wait a second, that's the cost of doing business.
Right.
That's not a cost, that's not anything that the employee is getting, but it's eye-opening, and I think to Ms. Pennypaker's point, it is something that does get lost, especially on the medical benefit side. In a lot of cases, and I know that, again, longer prior life coming here and seeing just the benefits that we offer here
Yeah, they're
opposed to what I had in industry. But I do think that to a degree that is a selling point when it comes down to staffing and finding staff. So here's the thing, we're looking at negotiations, we're talking about different things, and so one of the strong benefits that our PERC has are the medical plans, that we have in place. And if you start venturing too far outside of that realm, it may be detrimental to staffing, because even if we were to say, okay, here's our plan A, compared to, we're really comparing to other districts, so we need to look at what the other districts in this area are also providing their staff. It's tough to take, it's apples and oranges if we were to say, here's what Upper Perk is offering opposed to, titanium finishing or anybody else. So anything in industry kind of loses that comparability. We're really looking at the comps, essentially in other districts to say, where are we? Who are we competing against for staff? And who are we competing on? Are we bringing in people at a bachelor step 1, or are we competing with people at master's step 5? Who are we really trying to pull in? Who are we enticing to move to the district? It's a whole package, and I think that's another thing just to consider. It's not just one number. It is that entire package when looking at staffing and filling vacancies.
And that happens with every employee, because being on the conversations with Georgie, that, okay, here's where the offer is in terms of dollars and cents if they're on the scale, or with the education they have. And she definitely explains to go through the CBA and look at the things, but don't just look at first year number. You got to look at this year's number and You know, there are some districts that we are in our marketplace that we compete with, like you're saying, in 15 years, top of the scale, we're slightly higher than they are. But you wouldn't think that without looking.
Right.
You know, and I'm not saying huge, you know, but there's a difference, you know. Or their first number is a little different, or they have the different benefits in the CBA or other perks in there are viewed differently in other places. So, and that's what the work that most of you know from this past summer.
Yes.
To try to do all the work that we've
Yes.
done with the
Well, that's one of the problems with our negotiations schema. You know, the fact that we are competing against these other areas and we have such disparities in the demographics for the areas.
Right.
You know, Springford, look at everything they have down there as far as revenue income versus, you know, what do we have up here? What does Park Valley have? What does Bordertown, Pottstown have? So, you know,
That's exactly the district that I was talking about, and number, we're higher. You won't think that off the gun.
I know, you have to look at the long-term effect.
You think,
You know, unless you're just, you know, it depends on the industry you're in, and, you know, obviously the education industry, which it is different from a normal occupation. You know, I mean, look at it, you've
That's a
got,
nice way to say that.
you've got a collective bargaining unit that, you know, wants to get everything they can, whereas these other unions, you know, you're working different hours, you're working different shifts, things like that. In the computer industry, I've been in it for, I don't know, 30 years now, I guess. Back in the mid-'80s, when the computer desktop first came out, you know, Microsoft Windows first came out. If you had just a little bit of experience, 6 months' time, you could jump from your current job at a help desk to another company and make $5,000, $10,000 more. You know, luckily that only lasted for a few years and that sort of died out, but I mean, that is what some people are simply looking at. You know, I knew a person who was a research scientist, and his vow was, I will never stay with the company more than 4 to 5 years, because after that point, you're being taken advantage of. Okay, that's one way to look at things, but at the same time, you know, where are you looking at your longevity? And, you know, sooner or later, you might run out of, if you're in a specialized industry, you might run out of places to go to. So,
And then you have a bad reputation for jumping jobs.
well, I look at that all the time now. I mean, even our own candidates, when we viewed people for our open positions, different positions, 2 to 3 years, 2 to 3 years, 2 to 3 years.
Yep,
What was wrong, or what are they chasing?
right.
You know, and is that what we want to build within our company here?
Right,
So,
yep,
and that's different if it's in the organization versus
exactly,
ping-pong effect.
yep.
exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
I struggle looking at the end product. You know, we're not making widgets. And so what is our return on investment? What is our academic achievement? Why are we so low academically? I mean, in the county. And so that's what I look at. And, you know, just, I just struggle with that.
Conversation for another night.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed.
Or breakfast.
Okay.
And just like I just want to have the last say.
Yes.
As far as.
Oh, well, we'll
as far
fix
as-
that.
No, I know.
Take charge.
No, but as far as, you know, I think to Mr. McCarrick's point, a 22-year-old first-year teacher is looking at something completely different than, you know, a late 20s, 30-year-old, you know, who's been in education. And so if we're talking about what is that bachelor step one, you know, starting salary. But if I'm 22 and I'm relatively healthy with the benefits, you know, I don't really care.
Nobody cares.
Yes.
I want to go buy a car. I want to pay off the loans. I want to just go do whatever I want to do. Opposed to, geez, just even a few years later where you go, okay, well, if I'm, you know,
I need
I'm
health care for my
healthcare,
family.
I have a spouse, I'm starting a
Oops,
family.
I'm having a family.
So all that, you know, does factor in. So, you know, it's going to depend on who you're really targeting and who your real applicants are. If you're getting a lot of applicants fresh out of school, it may not be, you know, the biggest selling point right off the bat. But if you're bringing in, you know, teachers with a few years of experience, which there's positive there. There's somebody with, you know, marketable experience that, you know, to Peg's point, you would think would bring in, you know, their expertise and would lend to student achievement, being higher, to get that person in the door. They're not looking just at, what that base salary is. They're, again, making assumptions here, but they may be looking at that whole package, which, so, long answer to, do we have medical, costs yet? But we'll work on getting everything kind of put together, and it's definitely going to be a point of conversation as we move forward with negotiations. And I'm not, I know the 22nd for the board retreat.
Okay.
We'll have some of that. I'm not sure if we'll have, the level of detail you may be looking for at that date, but we will definitely have the figures and totals of what the real impact is going to be to the district as we kind of move forward.
Okay. Yep.
Um,
I feel so much more comfortable with budgeting now. This is my 5th one, so I feel a lot more comfortable with it now. I feel like I know there's numbers are
It
all
was a
stuck
tough
in here
choice.
somewhere.
It was a tough choice between hiring you or Megan, so.
That's it, yeah, I know. I know. I didn't want to give up my school board pay. Yeah, really.
I would have just handed it over and said, Melanie.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Help yourself.
What's your benefits?
Yeah, that's it.
So I think I'd be remiss if I didn't just point this out as far as where we are currently with the assessments as they currently stand. Year over year, if we were to look at the upper end of the revenue, we said it's opt-out, we're going to hit 4, and then we elect for 4.2. The increase for real estate taxes, real estate tax revenue, would be $1.4 million amount for what the 2022-2023 school year would be compared to what it is for the 21-22 school year. So just showing the full gamut of options from zero being essentially negative 233,000 to an increase of 1.4 million in the revenue line item. But as I said earlier, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. I think really you find out what your expenditures are, what your anticipated expenditures are, and then you're looking how are we
And get there.
How are we getting there? And can you get there? Then if you can't get there, all right, what do we have any fluff? Do we not have fluff? If we don't have fluff in the expenditure side, what gives? What do we need to do to try and level that out? Or are we looking at fund balance? And that's a bigger conversation that I think we'll get into as we kind of move forward into budgeting.
Just don't say cut programs, okay?
Honestly,
I appreciate if you don't say that.
I don't want to say that by any means. I don't think that we're ever had any conversations over that.
I was channeling Ryan, sorry.
No, I mean, realistically, we'd love to get to the point where it's balanced and we can say, okay, revenues and expenditures, they line up. Are you comfortable with that? It's, and that's where we are. And ideally, we wouldn't have to raid the fund balance, because I'll reiterate what Sandy's ingrained into the board is that's basically one-time money that's been built up over the course of time. So as soon as you tap those funds, they're not there next year. That's just one thing that needs to be kind of clear as we go forward. They're there to be used if necessary. I mean, having the cash sit on the sideline with no intended purpose, it isn't the point. It's to make sure that we are fiscally sound, that we can absorb any kind of unexpected expenditure that may arise or any funding delay that we may see. I know it's happened in the past where, the state has said, I think specifically on the transportation side, they said, well, you know what, you're not going to get your December transportation. We'll give it to you, later on, and later on never comes, and then that becomes that shortfall. So just full transparency. That's what those funds will be there for. It has happened, but just want to throw it out there.
Okay.
Honestly, that was kind of all I wanted to touch on as far as budget, and really wanted to touch on STEM zero not being zero, zero is negative 1.13, and really, that kind of puts us behind the 8 ball, as we're saying, from just a sheer dollars and cents, not from are we funding our programs, but from a revenue based on that would be less next year than it is this year. And just want to be transparent with the committee and the other board members who are present.
Yep, that's good,
All right?
that's good. We like real numbers, they're awesome.
Any other questions that just kind of drives out, or anything that the committee or the other board members would like to see, specific to this?
Danny's providing an update on Saturday during the retreat on the budget. So if you have any questions lingering, let us know now, because we can work on it and have it for the full board.
I get it.
Not too in-depth, but we only have like 45 minutes set aside, but definitely dig a little deeper than what we're doing here. If there's anything that you think of, let's fire it out.
And then at the February Finance Committee meeting, I'm assuming from here on out, we're going to have at least a portion of each meeting be dedicated to the budget. So what are we looking at discussing at the February budget, Finance Committee
That's a
meeting
good
with regards
question.
to the budget?
As far as specific to budget, I think we'll probably at that point, I'd like to start with the big drivers, which would be salaries and benefits and where we stand with that. I think that starts with like I said, the big portions of the budget that we can kind of discuss where we stand with that. And I'd rather start with the big numbers and kind of work our way into the minutia. I think starting there with the salary and benefits would probably be the best use of time.
Yep, I agree. That's the big ones.
Maybe a part of our budget timeline, we could also map out what topic is in February, what topic is in March, what topic is in April. If we need a second meeting in there, I think at some point we had
Yeah, I think
a double
usually we
meeting.
get to a point where we have two.
I think
Yeah.
we kind of had a,
One.
I
And
think we
then
had a
once a
roadmap
week we
laid
did
out
it.
last year, I'm not sure.
Yep.
We did,
The
yeah.
agendas. Or did do specific
I think in
areas.
March and April, we had two meetings.
At least,
And then in June, we only have one meeting planned in the calendar in June. We moved it a week back, so it's all the week of graduation.
Right.
It gives us enough time to, when we publish in May, the full time for approval in June. So,
Yep.
yeah, that should be a part of the calendar.
And I think
Yes.
as far as last year, we were able to have a final, a June Finance Committee meeting 3 days prior, 2 days prior to the board meeting. So it gave one last, here are any of the tweaks that may have occurred from, if there's a May Finance Committee meeting to the June Finance Committee, just to be fully transparent with anything that if we're going through and trying to kind of pull anything out that we need to, make sure that we have everything that should be, budgeted for is in there. So it lends for having those kind of fine tuning, hopefully at that point, fine tuning conversations and nothing earth shattering.
Yes.
I had a question, I can't remember what it was. Do we have any idea